today. It's not because I really don't think that it falls along the lines of a sermon. It's more like a presentation, like when you would get some, big wig from Friends United meeting or something like that, to come out and speak in the middle of worship. And then rather than actually giving a message that brings you into the presence of God, they tell you things about what Friends United meeting is doing. And that's kind of like what this is. So although it's possible that you might be brought into the presence of God, that's always my hope. That's not exactly I think what a presentation like this is going to create, and it may create a lot of questions. So my thought is that I will present it, and then perhaps we can have a few minutes of silence, and out of the silence, if you have questions, you can ask them. There may be lots of questions, there may be no questions. One of the interesting things is that you will see here two groups of pictures from Samburu and from Turkana of people who are not always, but sometimes wearing kind of ceremonial garb that causes them to look quite different than we do. And those pictures in which the people look the most different are the ones where you can be the most certain that those people are friends or Quakers. Some of these are pictures of Kenyan Quakers, and some of them are pictures of Kenyan Quaker institutions. And the ones at the institutions, it's very hard to know, are the people in these pictures Quakers or are they not? I wouldn't be able to tell you, but the ones of people at worship, whether their worship involves dancing and the way that they dance, or singing, those are all friends. For those of you who are on telephone, I'm really sorry about that. I think what is going to happen, if we're lucky, is that you will hear a lot of music. It will go on for about somewhere around 12 minutes. And then you'll hear silence. And I hope that the music is at least meditative. The music has absolutely nothing to do with Kenya. It's just the music that I've been listening to for the past 6 weeks or so. And I thought it was kind of meditative. And if there's nothing that the pictures have to offer, at least you'll have some meditative music. And I hope I can get this to work. It's going to involve me switching a lot of things on and off. So
Dan?
Yeah.
What were some of the common elements that you felt in both in the meetings and then also when you were moving in the outreaches and the other missions, the hospital, the agricultural, at school?
No, I am not sure that there necessarily was a lot of commonality. Somewhat like friends in the United States, there's just a wide range of expressions of Quakerism. In worship, one commonality is definitely the use of music and dance. And I think, as I mentioned the week before last, I think that really is a way of touching the transcendent. John Moru, who was for 20 or 25 years the director of Turkana Friends Mission, said to me in relation to that ceremony where they were celebrating their anniversary. So there were a bunch of different churches who were represented there, and they were each called up to do, say, either one or two songs. I can't remember what. And after a little bit, then the kind of master of ceremonies would say, okay, your turn is over, and it's time for you to leave now. And they just wouldn't. And John said to me, once they start dancing, they don't hear anything. And I think that was his way of saying they are in another plane. They're not hearing anymore. I don't think that they were necessarily trying to hold the spotlight captive. They simply started dancing, and they were no longer aware of time. But what the dancing means, what the singing means, are probably very different depending on where you are. And I think far more than in the United States, there's a huge class difference among friends in Kenya. Clearly, the friends that you saw pictures of at the Triennial are middle to upper class. And very obviously, the friends in Samburu and Turkana are impoverished. And someone who was the director of Samburu Friends Mission for quite a while paid a visit to Turkana and came back and said, the people in Samburu are poor, but the people in Turkana have nothing. I think that probably has some impact on their theology, but I don't know. I don't know what that is. I know that from discussions I've heard among Kenyan friends, some of the more urban friends are veering towards Pentecostalism. Some of the more rural friends are the ones who say you have to remember the Friends' emphasis on peace and peacemaking, which is an ever-present concern for them in their society with its kind of tribal politics. I had one more thing I was thinking of. I spoke for a while to Dorcas Otieno, who is one of the missionaries that Kenyans are sending to Tanzania. And when you listen to Nicholas and Dorcas, it can be a little mind-boggling. You have to kind of step away from your rational sense of Quakerism and go back to the time of the early Friends, because Nicholas will talk about preaching to wild animals and being led to safety by a leopard. And these are things that we don't talk about in North America. So their evangelicalism has miracles and wonders in it on a daily basis, and yet at the same time, Dorcas was asking me what I could do to publicize the work that she is doing among widows or women who have had to flee from their husbands, and they routinely take in children who are running away from their parents because they're 10 or 11 or 12 years old, and their parents want to marry them off. And she's telling me about how they protect women from female genital mutilation. And it's this weaving together of evangelicalism and social concern that used to be the norm for Americans in the 1860s and 70s and 80s, but is no longer. When we kind of think that you can be evangelical or socially concerned, but you can't be both. In Kenya, you can still be both. But I can't say how that divides up class-wise. And it's really clear to me that there are class differences, but it's clear to me that they exist, but it's not clear to me what they are in terms of theology.
Dan, is water still a big issue for getting water, out into
Yes.
the countryside and so forth?
Yes. Even when in places where water is readily accessible, like for instance, Lugulu Hospital, you still have to run it through a filter or in other ways purify it before you can actually use it. Turkana is in the midst of a 5-year drought, which has probably been greatly exacerbated by climate change. And they have had to give up. They used to routinely keep herds of camels, cattle, goats, and sheep. And in Turkana, they now have almost no cattle, and they don't have many sheep and not as many camels because there's no longer enough vegetation to support cattle. Camels can do okay, but the water situation is such that they only have about 30% of the flocks that they had 6 years ago. Some of they've just died or they've gotten rid of them because the water situation is so severe. In one of the pictures of Lake Turkana, you saw the outlines of a hut that was actually in the water. For many years, the level of water in Lake Turkana has been falling. And now for some reason it's filling again, and people don't know why it's filling. But it's probably not a good thing that it's filling again, because it's probably tapping into some other source. Clean water is an issue everywhere. Just water at all is a huge issue in Turkana, and something of an issue in Samburu. It's just anywhere in the country, it's just nothing you can take for granted that you will have water available to you.
And one more thing, the ladies with all the necklaces, is that a status symbol, or what is that about, where they go clear up to their faces?
So the Samburu have the kind of discs around their neck, and the Turkana have the necklaces that go clear up to their chins. And I suspect that there is some level of prosperity that is shown by that, but I don't know exactly what. It's also really clear that the older women wear those necklaces all the time, and the younger women wear them only for ceremonial occasions. You could see the same thing with the young men who had who were wearing their blankets, and they had their herding sticks that they carry with them always, and they had put them on over like t-shirts for the Los Angeles Lakers and other things like that, and they were all carrying cell phones. If they were young men, they were all carrying cell phones, or well, maybe not all, but almost all of them.
Right here, Kenya, you have to have a cell phone because their change of money is done via a cell phone. Isn't
Yeah.
it? Or
Yes, you pay with your cell phone. And so they actually have out in places like Turkana, you can go to a store and you can get a small kit with a solar panel that will provide enough energy for you to charge a cell phone and a flashlight. And so people can either share the kits so they can all keep their cell phones charged up, or one person will have a cell phone for the village, or something like that. But yeah, their infrastructure for rural areas, even places like Turkana, is not that different from our infrastructure for rural areas, except that they have readily available solar panels, which we do not have.
Why is that?
Why don't we have readily available?
Yeah.
solar-
What's the, yeah, I mean, why?
Because
Moved into that area.
because they skipped over wires. They were never able to electrify by wire or provide telephone service by wire to the entire country. So they skipped over wires and they went to radio, which is basically what cell phones are. So they skipped wires and went to wireless. And I think because of their dependence on wireless, they developed the solar panels. Yeah, they didn't have that intermediate technology, so they leapfrogged over it. And in that sense, they're ahead of us.
Are the animals that are wandering around the streets, are they communal animals?
They belong to people. And they are marked in some way. I didn't see many marks, but they may be branded. They may have ear notches, but they are marked, and people know who they belong to. The ones that wander around on the streets are sometimes hobbled and sometimes not. I think it's a very dangerous life for a goat to not be hobbled. But in areas like Turkana, if the animals have the right of way, and if you hit a goat, you will be charged with a criminal offense, and if you're not, you might be killed by mob violence. I mean, the animals take precedence over the vehicles. At least in Turkana. I'm not sure that that's true of more urban places, but there aren't as many wandering around the streets in the urban places.
Is there much pressure from wildlife, wild animals, as far as on the remnants of herds that they're there? You know, or is the wildlife pretty much completely contained in more remote areas, more.
So, I mean, in theory, the folklore explanation for why the young men have those sticks and such is because it is their task to protect the herds from wild animals. It's also true that in many, many places, even though the herds are out during the day, they're brought back into an enclosure in the evening. How much actual pressure there is from wild animals, I'm not sure. I kind of get the feeling that most lions and big cats are probably now enclosed in game parks, and they have massive game parks. I did not hear of anyone having to defend their flock from wild animals, but I did see photographic evidence of flocks being killed by flash flooding, which is far more frequent now that they're in the middle of a drought. So when the rain comes, it always floods. And I've seen pictures of 50 to 100 goats who've all drowned in the middle of a flash flood. So I don't know. But I kind of get the sense that lions are not the real threat to the flocks, but that climate change is.
Lions have decreased by almost 80% in the last 20 years. So
Were the hippos in the water that you saw, or was that elsewhere?
They were in Lake Victoria. There are other places also. But the ones that I saw were in Lake Victoria, and they were in the water. They come out at night. In Kisumu, which is where I was, they have a reputation for rummaging through a golf course that is built along the shores of Lake Victoria. I think the golfers are not very happy with what they do to the putting greens, but no one wants to challenge the hippos because hippos are known to be quite dangerous. So
I understand.
I hope that picture you took, you were using a telephoto lens, or were
Yes.
you actually that close?
No, I was in a boat and I was using a really large telephoto lens. And the boat that I was in was like the boat that you saw the guy throwing a fishing net out of. And it was the bumpiest, most up and down, back and forth movement that I have ever had to try to master in order to get photographs. It was really physically difficult just because of the amount of motion that happens in one of those boats.
Two food questions. In the picture that had the three bushel basket size containers with something green in them, what food was that?
Probably greens. I think at that particular that was kind of a feast. There were green beans. There were also, they always make greens, and probably one of those, I'm pretty sure. Oh, wait. No, you're talking about a different picture. Yes, those were all greens, and they just call them greens. Sometimes they call them local greens. You never quite know what the greens are. They just say greens, unless it's spinach, in which case they say it's spinach. But otherwise, it's just greens.
Is it leaf material or is it like
Yes.
little cabbage leaf? Okay.
No,
And then the
it's a little bit like collard greens, only not quite so bitter.
second food question. What fish were the fishermen taking? How big were they? Are they little fish like bass, or are they big like?
The one picture had them quite large, fairly large.
Right, yeah.
Then there were the nets, those were.
So I think that they have put tilapia into Lake Victoria, and they both try to farm it. And I think that they're just I guess you'd say free range, but that's not a word for fish. But my guess is that most of them were tilapia. I know that there are other things that can come out of Lake Victoria, other much larger things, but I think most of them were probably smaller fish like tilapia. And then those really large fish that were from Lake Turkana were catfish of some sort. I think they also have perch in Lake Victoria. I'm sure they have all kinds of things, but I think the thing that they were catching in those huge nets were probably tilapia. And then there was the picture of the guys kind of piling the net into the boat, and then right after that, there was a picture of a bunch of water birds kind of pacing along a net. And apparently the water birds have discovered that there are sometimes fish that the fishermen don't get out of the net once they're done with it. And so they stalk the shore, picking the fish out of the nets. And the people along Lake Victoria call them lazy birds.
Smart birds.
I know that this piece of information will encourage you not to order tilapia the next time you see it on the menu, but the Cincinnati Zoo uses tilapia in the Fiona and the hippo environ because tilapia love hippo poo. So the next time you have a choice,
That's probably why they're in Lake Victoria too.
yes. Next time you have a choice, choose the whitefish.
Okay.
I just cannot resist doing this. Well then, are all minds clear? In which case, Connie would move to the piano and we'll approach the closing hymn. After which Dan will offer the benediction.